Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. Now, today, prime example of me being a bit of a dumpster fire. I get so enthralled in the conversation with our guest, Dr. Kristal DeSantis, that I forgot to do a proper episode intro. So, this is me going back and giving you the intro. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to segue right into what we're talking about, Austin is not a great city for dating, apparently.
That is the perfect segue because you're right. Nashville is also. I'm a firm believer. Any tourist town is not good for dating. It's the sad truth. But I was like, you get so many 48-hour friends
Exactly.
that it's impossible to foster genuine connection sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing is that it's not impossible, but it is much harder because, a lot of people are just kind of passing through or trying it out. It becomes a little bit of a, like you said, like the 48-hour friend thing, or that, if you get into a relationship, there's always some new matches that you could be looking at, right? Or new options that you could be having. So that can make dating in a tourist city pretty challenging.
I say you have to be really impressive to stand out in front of 2 million people. Because realistically, if you're on the apps and you're swiping, I was like Nashville on any given weekend here in like the spring to fall, we see anywhere from 1.5 to like 2 million people just in the city for events, concerts, locals. So in order to stand out amongst that huge pool, you got to be either paying for it or you got to be one heck of a catch.
And that's so interesting because at the end of the day, when it comes to relationships, all that matters is that you have the right connection with the right person.
It's so true. So when you land in front of the right person, it's so easy.
Yeah.
Like when it's that's how you know it's meant to be because conversation flows, body language, time is non-existent. But the hardest part is, like I said, just finding that actual person. The landscape is so different nowadays from the time of our grandparents, our parents. My oldest sibling, there's like 12 years between us. Dating from when he was in that single era, his bachelor phase, to me and my current bachelor phase, it's night and day.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was like, I actually had to go out and talk to people. We had to have a little bit of game. You don't get 2 or 3 days to think of what you're going to say to a person. You got to say it to them now because you don't know if you'll see them again.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you see as the biggest change? Like when you have those conversations with your...
Yeah, there's so many things, but I want to say as a whole, I think the biggest change that we've seen in the dating world is accessibility. Before, I think a lot of people found people just in their natural circles, whereas the internet and apps and some of the other in-betweens, they just give us a broader spectrum, a wider net to cast from. And so you might not run into these people at the clubs or bars you go into, the bookstores, the grocery store. The grocery store is great to meet people. I've met a lot of great people shopping for produce. I will not lie. But people don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, I was like, a lot of people, they get their groceries delivered or they're on some type of like food delivery service or they just order out. So once again, I was like, we're coming across more people, but we're not actually meeting people.
Totally.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really, that's the biggest change that I see. There's less or fewer opportunities for people to be present with other people, right? Because like before apps, you would just go out and see who you would run into, right? Like that was a valid dating strategy. Just walk outside, go to a bar, right? Go to some gathering location, be present, be available. And like you said, you have to engage with people. Now, it's kind of that paradox of like, well, you could be engaging with somebody who lives in, 3 states over, or lives in a different country, or lives, like in a different, all of these places. It seems like there's more accessibility, but what it's really done is remove those opportunities to just be present with another person, which then I end up seeing later on when it comes to couples having a really hard time being present with each other. Right. So even once you get past the dating stage, being in a relationship, you know, there's always something calling you on your phone, right? Whether it's work, whether it's I need to
Yeah.
schedule a food delivery, or oh, that's something I noticed is like we've kind of lost the art of being present, just in our lives and then with other people, you know. So
We're so detached. Like you said, whether we're ordering off Uber Eats or watching Hulu or Netflix, we can get emails on our phone now. Like it's before, not everybody used to have computers in their home or internet, so work stayed at work. Now
absolutely.
work is 24/7.
Hmm.
We're also doing longer hours. Like especially in both our cities, traffic's getting out of hand,
Yeah.
so we're having longer commute times. So even like you said, after the courting phase, trying to date, you actually have very little face to face time with people to even form those bonds.
That goes across every type of relationship, right? Like friendships. I mean, how hard is it to even make a group of friends these days, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, like you said, it would seem that we gather more people together, you give people more options, more access to online, but it becomes a little bit like the paradox of choice. So the paradox of choice is the human brain is only built to handle so much information at a time, and if it gets overwhelmed, it can crash. Right. And so this is one of the things is that you think having a lot of options would be better, right? And there was this famous experiment of like peanut butter at the grocery store. It's like, well, if you have 20 different types of peanut butter, you've got the chunky, you've got the smooth, you've got this brand, you've got sugar added, you've got jam added, you've got, the organic, you've got the extra nut butter, right? You've got all these options. What they found was that that choice would get so overwhelming that people would instead leave the store without making a choice because their brains, it was just like, oh, I just can't. Right. It's kind of like, I don't know if you're searching for a deal and next thing you know, it's like 5 hours later and you're like comparing all these different things and you're like, oh, I just give up. Right. I can't. Um,
Yeah.
and you end up maybe choosing nothing. Right. Or you choose something and then you're not satisfied with it because you're like, oh, well, I could have got the other deal if I would have looked a little harder. You second guess your choice. And so that's kind of in a lot of ways what's happening with dating is like, how do you choose between all the people on this app? And then once you do make your choice, there's always that little voice in the back of the head that says, like, well, like we just talked about, if you're in a vibrant city, I mean, maybe there's somebody who just moved here that would be a better match for me. Maybe there's somebody else who's, just become single and is popping on the app, and maybe that would be a better person for me. And so, just that, like the paradox of choice, sometimes having more options is not always the best thing because it can overwhelm our brains and make us unhappy with the choices that we've made or make us incapable of making a choice at all.
That's so true. Another example that a lot of people relate to is our closets. We always spend so much time looking like I have nothing to wear. We have ample outfits in there, but like you said, there's so many choices, and then you get so hyper focused on your choice that you second guess yourself, and you're like, oh well, there's nothing. Nothing looks good. Nothing's
Yeah.
the right fit, and then you just grab something, and then
And the
you get
whole
to wherever
night,
you're
you're
going.
like,
Exactly. You're like, I didn't really want to wear this.
yeah.
Yeah. It's something that is it's so simple, but a lot of people don't think about it. They're just like, well, like dating should be easier, like you have all these options. Once again, all these options, they're consuming data within your brain. They are either holding you back or causing you to drag your feet. And you could probably agree with this or disagree with it. A lot of times, what I see from personal experience or with any of the clients I work with is that you don't have a lot of time when you are trying to start something new. People, they get bored quicker. So you have a day, maybe two tops, to distinguish yourself, land a date or a match, and then get off the apps. If you take any more time than that, most people, they either forget or they just lose interest. They're on to the next thing already.
Makes it so tough, right? Because I think also dating and relationships on an app, it can kind of end up being treated like online shopping,
Oh
right? Where
yeah,
it's like, I'll leave it in the cart, I'll come back to it, and then you don't. But it's a person on the other side. It's an actual human who's trying to make a connection. And that can be really painful and really devastating when it comes to self-esteem, when it comes to confidence, when it comes to, the willingness to put yourself back out there. If, this is the experience, right? You're being treated like a option in a shopping cart. And so I think that's also where it can be really unhealthy, emotionally, on a mental health level. It can be really not a good thing, right?
it's something I think it, regardless of gender, it affects everybody because statistically the pools of people are skewed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for women, they have such a large sample, but they're likely to cut out 80% of their dating pool because they're so hyper fixated on people, and or that 20% who get excluded. It's like they're that kid at the dance, just sitting, watching on the sidelines, waiting for their turn. Or you always feel like the last person to get picked on the team, and that starts to wear down your personality. It starts to weigh on you. No matter how confident you are, when you aren't picked or you feel like you're not picked enough, you really start to second guess yourself, and that can diminish or reduce the likelihood that you get picked in the future. Because if you think that you're not good enough when somebody finally does show interest, then you might start to have an insecure attachment style, and you either try to overcompensate and like you're so excited that you got picked, you get that new puppy energy, or that you are afraid to get hurt, so you don't really put enough forward. And I think that really is prevalent in like the way men approach women nowadays. Sorry. I was actually just out with my friends. They were in town, a couple of my guy friends. We went out to a bar, and they were all single. They wanted to have a good time. They wanted to meet some people, because the drive from where they came from is really short. So they come down here quite frequently. So they don't mind dating down here or vice versa. But we got there, and we're very social people. So we don't mind talking to people, drumming up conversation. But we walked in, and all of a sudden you see there's just like this massive divide of either people on their phones not really looking up to see if you can engage, or like they're also just way more guys than girls out there. So trying to approach somebody without coming off as quote unquote creepy or giving somebody the ick, which is a term that everybody loves to use nowadays, is really tough. You go just to strike up genuine conversation, and sometimes it's not received well. And I think that's mostly due to our lack of actual human connection, being present. We don't really know how to converse anymore. Because when I was in college and I would be in the same situation going out on a Friday or Saturday night, the women were looking up at the guys were looking up at the women. We were buying drinks, we were dancing. And that segued into maybe getting a number or something,
Sure.
or scheduling a date later on.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, if you're not even looking up at me, chances are nobody's going to go out of their way to try to get you out of that phone or whatever you're distracted with to start a conversation.
Yeah, I think regardless of the gender thing, it's a really problematic thing for human connection in general. Right? I mean, if we think about it, the people that are dating now, dating age now, probably grew up with a computer, a phone in their hand,
Mm-hmm.
right? So again, it's like this is what grabs your attention. Humans are not as interesting. They don't have the volume of interesting things that a phone can immediately give you, right? The instant
Yeah.
gratification, right? With a human, there's neural pathways that you have to have developed in order to tolerate looking at somebody in the eyes, being able to kind of be okay with pauses in a conversation,
Right.
knowing the flow of communication. And a lot of that gets lost when, if you grew up completely just sitting in front of a computer or sitting in front of a TV. I mean, there's lots of research about how, that kind of interaction from a really young age changes a child's brain. It's not the same as having engagement from a parent or having peers that they can engage with. Even growing up with video games, it's different than having a group of kids that go and play together outside. And sure, they might do the same game. You guys are on one team, we're on the other team, and we play capture the flag. Well, now we're playing the same game, but it's online, and it feels like a group activity. But you're not getting all of the nonverbals that you would be getting if you were with someone in person. And those are the things that really make a difference when you're trying to approach people in person. It's not just the text, it's also the subtext.
That's correct. And along with underdeveloping these neural pathways, these habits, like you said, just physically being inside more has a lot of psychological impacts on you. Growing up in front of a computer, if you're playing any type of game online, two things that I find that's different from previous generations, you are now lacking rejection and resiliency in a sense. And what I mean by that is when you are outside playing, we pick teams. Now an algorithm puts you on a team. So you don't know who passed up on you. Are your friends going to be on this team? Are you not? All those little things. Or you don't know if you're picked first, if you're picked last, if you're picked in the middle. It doesn't matter. And then also, I was like, we got hurt a lot outside. We went outside. We got hurt. We learned to bounce back from things. I feel like when you are online, though, that risk and the consequence is diminished. So with those two aspects, that also is displayed when you're just trying to interact with people. I was in the store and I had asked somebody if they could hand me something, and they did, but they didn't look me in the eye. And so that made me feel some type of way. I was like, well, what's going on? Like, is there something on my face?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, am I being too robust? Like, why aren't you looking me in the eye?
Yeah.
But then I noticed, I was like, well, they are in that 18 to like 22 age range where they probably didn't have to do a lot of eye-to-eye interacting.
And I want to say that, our brains, so if anyone's listening and they're like discouraged, they're like, I was one of those kids that my parents put me in front of an iPad, or, I really didn't get to develop a lot of social skills. Maybe I had, childhood illnesses. I had to stay inside. I also want to say, like, there's a lot of benefits to having access to friend groups that are not maybe the kids at your school, right? It's like there are other kids that find a lot of comfort in having an online group of friends if the people at school are not friendly to them. But I think there's something else that, two things. One, when parents were able to be a little bit more present with their kids, one of the things that, again, healthy parents teaching kids, proper social skills and learning to live in community is what you said of, kids would get hurt outside. Yes. And then they would get care. They would get the experience of being cared for. Mom would come, or some other kid would be like, hey, what happened, right? Call an older kid. They would get care for that rupture, right? That wound. And then also there might have been times too where the hurt wasn't physical, it was emotional, right? It's like, so-and-so was mean to me, they threw a rock at me and I didn't like it. It's like, well, what are you going to do about that? Again, you would get the experience if you had the healthy community, if you had older siblings that were involved, if you had parents that were involved, that would say, all right, well, what do you want to go talk to him? Like, or let's talk about how that wasn't nice. Or if your kid was the bully, it'd be like, we don't do that. You need to go apologize, right? And so getting those experiences of social skills, as opposed to, if you get bullied in an online game, you're not necessarily going to go and be like, hey, mom, these kids just called me all kinds of terrible names. She'll be like, okay, isn't that the game? Okay, bye. Right. And so again, I don't want to say, I'm sure there are very involved parents, but that disconnect is definitely widening. So again, there's that, right? Like you said, the loss of the experience of rupture and repair in real time is something that's so important, especially when it comes to long-term success in a relationship, because when you end up living with a partner, you end up in a long-term relationship, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have ruptures. You're going to be mad at each other. You're going to have miscommunication. You're going to, have a day where you're just not getting along. And to have the skills to then come back and say, all right, here's what I did that I'm sorry for, or here, I'm sorry that I hurt you, the experience of care and repair. Like that skill is so important. And I think we're losing it a little bit because there's this, disconnect. And then the other piece that I was going to say, the other piece was, like I said, if there's a kid that's like, darn, that's me. I was the kid that, didn't really get the experience of having present and involved parents. I didn't have older siblings. I didn't get that kind of community, or maybe my older siblings were awful and, whatever, is our brains are still able to learn new material, learn new things, right? Neuroplasticity is a thing. Our brains want to change and evolve. I can use my own experience of during COVID, wearing a mask. And then as a therapist, I moved online, right? And so I got used to doing therapy online and having a mask and distancing. And then when everything got lifted, right? The mask mandate, and then you got to come in person again, I noticed that it was a lot of information compared to seeing people from shoulders up, right?
Yeah.
And it took me a while, as a therapist, which I had already been a therapist for, however many years, 6 years until COVID. And then during COVID, it was only, maybe let's say 18 months at the outside of really doing mass, and I wasn't in the office. But even during that period of time, like my nervous system completely changed so that I had to like reorient myself to being in the proximity of another person again.
Yeah. And that's something that still kind of is residual. You see residual traces even today.
Totally.
Sure, people are back out there, but still to this day, the minute you hear a sneeze, the minute you hear a cough,
Absolutely.
everybody like immediately like stops and like puts some distance between the poor COVID babies. I mean, you see that with like COVID babies who they didn't really get to socialize if they were in that certain age range. So learning to be around new kids was really tough for them because they weren't used to it, or the separation anxiety that they experience from their parents. There are, like I said, it takes 90 days for a habit to form. So the fact that we were in such a segregated state for so long really did change a lot of people. And like you said, it's the subtext that we may not be getting. And so when you're introduced into a new environment and you don't have that same subtext, there is a bit of dissociation, and it takes time for you to get comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the main thing I would emphasize is give yourself time to get comfortable, right? Like when you go to the club and you see like, God, this is like a middle school dance. Why are all the girls on one side and the boys on the other side? Nobody's talking to each other. Everybody's on their phone. And again, sure, different environments, might not be conducive for that. But if you realize like, I don't like being here, then where are the environments that you can go, not you specifically, where are the environments that you can go and say, I can exist with other people, I can make eye contact with them, it can be low stakes, and I can just practice what it's like to make eye contact or make a connection with somebody. And yeah, it's going to feel weird and uncomfortable at first, like maybe at the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
But those kind of low stakes points of connection, practicing that with somebody who's maybe not a dating prospect, right? Getting comfortable in a low stakes situation will help you feel more confident when you re-enter into a high stakes potential dating situation. Does that make sense?
I'm just going to touch on this real quick before we move on is as much as I said things have changed and not for the better, there are a lot of new things that when I first started dating or entered into adulthood that weren't available that are today. My friend sent me this video of, it was like a PowerPoint party. I don't know if you ever had one of those.
That, yeah.
Yeah. And I loved it. Like you either bring your single friend or like whatever, but your presentation is like your friend, like, making them, not the product, but kind of the product, and just seeing who would be interested in that. I was like, this is great because sometimes like you have trouble being your own advocate. So having somebody who knows you, your best qualities, your flaws, support you in that sense is really cool, I think. And also it allows you to be in a space, like you said, where you feel comfortable and that you could be yourself.
Yep.
A lot of times when you're in an overcrowded situation, you don't really know where you belong. Or if you are in a grocery store and you're not great at striking up conversation, that might not be the best place for you. So I think these events, stuff like that, they create kind of like a middle ground where you have to put a little bit on the line, but there's also a safety buffer where you're not fully exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of think about it like it's training, right? It's like, I mean, I'm trying to think like basketball, right? It's like you got to start by shooting hoops in your backyard, and then you go to maybe a pickup game. But if you just assume that, okay, I'm going to go and sign up for a league and I'm going to walk on that court and I'm going to freaking dominate, like you're going to set yourself up for a lot of disappointment, right? And then you're also going to have that experience where people are going to be like, what are you doing? Right? You're
Yeah.
clearly you haven't practiced at all. And so often with, anybody I work with is, just practice setting boundaries for your phone. Practice putting your phone down and going outside and, saying hi to a neighbor or taking a walk with your dog to the park and just make one point of connection with another random person there. And again, don't look for the hottest person. Don't look for the person who you think, oh my gosh, there might be a chance here. Just making connection, practicing holding eye contact. Again, just a conversation doesn't have to go anywhere, Yeah, that's a great brand of crackers. I got those last week. Whatever, right?
Right.
But just making a point of human connection and then also seeing how people respond to you.
Right.
It
Yes.
gives you a lot of information because if you don't practice, you don't know. And sometimes our worst enemies are the stories we tell ourselves in our heads of how things
Yeah.
will go. And either we like way overestimate our abilities. We're like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to go perfectly. And then you feel really disappointed when it doesn't. Or you really underestimate your likability.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so true. What if is such a scary place to live?
Exactly.
It does. It holds us back. We create a lot of regret and resentment towards the opportunities that we don't miss. So that's the point I was going to make. And I do something similar with the people I work with. I just say, hey, go out. I love the saying, like, go try to make a new friend every day or learn something new every day, along with daily affirmations, because it strongly suggest that my clients every morning, they look up and they say these affirmations, not in a journal, but in the mirror. If you learn to look yourself in the face and you get to be more comfortable, more confident in your own skin, when you present to another person and then you lock in and you send that same energy, it really creates a solidified experience. I can't imagine like trying to meet somebody and just not saying there's anything wrong with being timid, but not really looking into their eyes or really like connected, because there's so much body language that happens in the eyes and in the face. For me to take away that, to give myself that handicap would make me nervous. So I really like to focus on those areas at first when you're trying to make connection, because like I said, you don't have to, sure, it's an opportunity to find love every time you step out the door, but not every relationship you form has to be romantic. And I love that. A lot of the people I work with are like, well, like you could do so much better dating if you did X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I didn't come here to find a date. I just came to have a good time. I just came to connect with people, just be present with people.
Yeah.
And then if by chance somebody had interest or vice versa, then that's the next step. But I was like, I'm just out here to try to connect, I think that's a super important thing that I think more people just need to really be cognizant of. It's just being present and just enjoying the space that they're in.
Because also that it does two things, right? One, it widens your social circle so that you might not, again, like when you go to the grocery store, you might not meet the love of your life, but you might meet the brother of the cousin of the sister of the love of your life, right?
Yeah.
So again, just widening your network, it gives you more opportunities to then have that like organic way to connect, right?
Yes.
Which is still very important. And I think, having the stories of like, how did you guys meet? Well, I was the friend of a friend of a friend, and then they introduced us. We'd been hearing about each other for years, and finally we showed up at the same party, and we were like, oh my gosh, we should have done this years ago. Like that does still happen, but it happens because people are out there meeting other people and also maintaining those connections, because that's the other piece of like, if you just go to the grocery store and you're like, hi, 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 hi. And it's like, well, I mean, that's a good practice, but then what are you going to do with these connections, right?
Right.
how do you then maintain a relationship? Because that's also the skill of dating, right? Is sometimes what I noticed is, especially online, people tend to what call kind of accelerate intimacy, right? It's like they
Mm.
talk a little bit and suddenly they're like, all right, well, can we go to step 105 already? Whether that's let's go straight to some really deep conversations or let's go straight to being really sexual with each other. Which again, if you're just on an app to hook up, fine. But if you're there looking for something else, you also then have to cultivate the skill of maintaining a relationship. And it's not just, all right, I got a match. What do I do now? How do hi, would you like to see a picture of my body? Like, come on, you got to do more.
That's so true. And honestly, that brings up two good points that I thought of while you were talking is we go around collecting matches, but one of the things is, why did you get the match? Did you get the match because you thought the person was attractive? Or did you match because you actually had things in common? Because I don't know if you're single or not, but sometimes the bio section is abysmal for both men, for men and women. I didn't learn anything about you, so I'm now judging you just on your body, and that's not really enough to sustain a relationship. I was like, if you're polar opposites with nothing in common and different schedules, you're just wasting time. Unless, like I said, unless you're just there to hook up, then you might be able to have a brief little fling. But like I said, maintaining that connection, you want to set yourself up for success. So I always tell people, hey, I have a detailed bio, and it's not my whole life story, but it's major things that you should know about me, like interests that we can actually talk about for when we meet in public, or like I said, if we continue after date 2 or 3, we now have things that we have at least a foundation. A lot of these internet couples don't have foundations.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So I'm actually married, but okay. That is exactly my experience though, is when I first set my profile up online, it was like a girls' night thing. And so actually one of my friends decided to write it for me. She's like, I had gone through a breakup and I was like, I don't really feel like going on the apps. And she's like, oh, it's fine. I'll set up for you. I'll do it for you. Right. And so it was a very generic bio, like likes long walks on the beach, loves good restaurant, blah, blah, blah. Right. And I would get matches, but I was looking for a partner, a specific partner. And I also, this is what I tell, clients and people is like, there's companionship dating where you're just looking for somebody to hang out with. Like, hey, I've got 2 tickets to a movie. Hey, I just need someone to hang out with this weekend. Hey, who wants to go see this thing? And then there's partnership dating where you're looking for someone to build a life with on the long haul. Right.
Yeah.
And these are 2 different things. And, sometimes I see this all the time, right? In the bios where like, what is it? Looking for short-term, open to long. It's like, well, these are 2 very different agendas here.
It's so tough. One of the biggest problems that I find a lot of people face today is they're in such a rush. And they're in a rush to get a match. They're in a rush to meet up. They're in a rush to then define the relationship. Sometimes they don't know the type of relationship they want. Every relationship has to be your forever relationship. So the goal is for things to work out, but you can't force it. So I feel like when you I'm looking for a long-time partner, it's like a commitment. It's almost like a commitment.
Yes.
Beforehand. Yes. And I was like, listen, and you don't want to overcommit because you can meet or this happened to me.
Okay.
I do really I crush first dates. Some people make really good first impressions. And I know how to sustain relationships. However, and I do say this is also one of my toxic traits, so I'm going to tell it myself a little bit. I have a really hard time letting people down or breaking hearts. And so a lot of people, like I said, I was like, hey, we both said we were looking for long term, but looking long term, I don't think you're my person, but you might think I'm your person. We'll keep doing this for a while. We'll just keep wasting time. And then at some point, you're going to get really mad at me, or I'm going to do something that breaks your heart. And then we're both just going to be left in this not nice space. Whereas if I say hey, I just want to enjoy you at the, for now. And then if things progress, they progress. If not, that's okay as well. I feel like that's a little easier and it gives a little more space for an
Yeah.
out for people to not drag along, because
Mm-hmm.
that was something you heard a lot. Like, I feel like you
Mm-hmm.
were just leading me on. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I let you know, hey, this is just for right now.
Well,
But like you said, there's nothing wrong with committing either. This
yeah.
is just me trying to make it seem like it's not so bad.
Well, and the reason I say that, right, is because these are really two different paths, right? It's like you can have a great time dating someone for companionship. You
Mm-hmm.
travel well together, you like the same restaurants, you're having a great time. You can do that for a while. But then what I see often is that people then get to that like 2 year mark or something, to that, or something changes, like a lease ends or a job offer happens. And then that's when they want to start having those values conversations of actually,
Right.
do we want the same things in a long term partnership? And that's when I see people then try to force it because they're
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the connection so much.
Right.
And that actually is like, it's like trying to square a circle, right? Round peg, square hole, or whatever,
No, I visualize what you're talking.
Yeah, and honestly, that sets the marriage or the long term relationship up for constant conflict. It doesn't mean failure, but you're working way harder than you would if you were clear that, like, right now, I'm in the companionship phase. Like, I've got my career is my focus. I'm looking to meet good people, have a great time. Of course, you're not going to say I'm ruling out meeting the love of my life, but I'm not in that stage right now versus somebody who's like, I see myself in a long term partnership. And that's a full time job to be in a long term partnership,
Right.
right? And it's okay to not have the energy for that or not be interested in that at any given point. But it also means that your pool is going to be smaller, right? And I
Right.
think that's sometimes where people are like, oh, I don't want to limit my pool. And it's like, yeah, but quality, quantity, at some point you also got to narrow it down.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
was I was getting dates. Like some of these guys were nice, but like clearly there's nothing really about me and my values in my bio because it was written by a friend who was like,
Right.
"This is lovely." So I rewrote it. I rewrote my bio to really focus on like what I'm looking for in a long-term partner, and that's when I found my husband, right? And so I think just again that like there's nothing wrong with just going on dates and meeting people for fun companionship. But if you're really trying to look for somebody for the long term, first of all, you got to know what you're looking for. What's important to you in a long term partner, right? What do you want? Do you want
Yeah.
somebody who's as ambitious as you? Do you want somebody who wants to support your ambitions?
That's so true, and that's starting to become a second theme for this season. Is really taking the time to know not what you like in a partner, but what you need in a partner. Because there are a lot of nice things. Like, obviously, looks are nice, income is super nice, but realistically, when all that strips away, because anything could happen in life where you lose your job,
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
I was like, you're not going to look the same in 10 years. But who's this person that you're with? What do I need them to have for me to feel like I can keep committing to them each and every day? So I love that. I'm gonna support and reiterate that, guys. You do something before you go out, no matter what type of relationship you're looking for, whether it's companion based or long term. Just know what you're looking for. Like, really sit down, have that talk with yourself. Or if you're like me, I tell my friends they're not allowed to pick their own significant others. They're the people they date. Same with me, because we're doing something wrong. We have awful taste. But really, like, even have a conversation with your friend, somebody you really trust who knows you, and be like, hey, what do you think? What do you think about this? Like, here's what I think I'm looking for in a partner. Because sometimes, as much as we think we know ourselves, we do have a blind spot. So sometimes we need somebody to be like, hey, you're saying this, but your actions aren't really matching what you're saying. Reevaluate.
Also, your friends will call out if you've, maybe been in multiple relationships, but the pattern is the same, right? Your friends will be like, you keep choosing the same type of person
Yeah.
and expecting different results. I don't know if you notice that, right?
Yeah.
Having great friends that you have good relationships with, that you trust, that you can be honest with and vulnerable with, and talk about the real stuff with, it's only going to enhance your relationship potential and also any future relationships that you have. Right.
Kristal, I love the season. I think I've done a really great job, and the universe has also supported me by having people come on too. But I've loved every guest I've had this season, because I feel like, just like today, we're having great conversation. We're going to segue into a thing that kind of brought us together, your book. because I feel like we got to talk about that a lot. There are a lot of great tips in there, a lot of information that is also relevant to people seeking connection, seeking partnership. So tell us a little bit about your book really quick.
Yeah. So my book is called Strong, and the subtext is a relationship field guide for the modern man. I use the model Strong as a relational structure when I work with couples, just to kind of do the like, what is healthy? What is a healthy relationship? Healthy is strong. And so breaking strong down into an acronym of the pillars of what it means to have a healthy relationship. And then I wrote the book specifically kind of directed towards or tailored for men, simply because what I found was there's a lot of messages out there like men need to do better, men need to step up, but there wasn't a lot of encouragement of like, what does that mean? And as a therapist, if I was trying to find resources for my male clients, there wasn't that much out there. And so that's why, I took the strong model that I use for couples and really just directed this little field guide for the man who wants to kind of have a little, toolbox of tips and tools and skills of how to have a healthy, long lasting relationship.
I love that. And this is something that I've started to think about. And I've talked with a couple of therapists and coaches. A lot of people like work with their gender, or which to me confused me. Because when I actually first started out, this show, it was the purpose to like say, hey guys, we need to do better. But this show is for women. That's why I started this, because I had a lot of female friends who just needed advice, or they're like, I want to know what a guy's thinking. So I was like, hey ladies, here's from a normal guy the thought process behind it, because I feel like you need that other perspective. My guy friends, I don't think I give as good advice sometimes, for the sole fact that we either think alike, and so I'm a little too nice with them, and then I don't tell them what they really need to hear, because like I said, I know the goals that they have. Whereas with my girlfriends, I'm like, you shouldn't tolerate this behavior. Here's what I think the disconnection is coming from. If this, with like roles, I was like, I give more detailed advice, and I feel like it's not necessarily more genuine, but I just feel like it's a better quality of advice. So I was like, I don't understand why people don't work more with their counterparts.
Yeah.
Because I was like, why not get the other perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. I love, part of the work, especially with couples, is like being able to play translator a little bit, where, like you said, I'm able to kind of translate what I'm hearing one partner say and into a language the other partner can understand. A lot of the people I work with find that skill very valuable. And so that's what also I was hoping to do with this book is like, I'm a woman, I'm, a female therapist, but I really want men to be successful. And I wanted to kind of counteract some of the maybe messages that men receive of like, it's very confusing out there. And so I'm like, hey, here I am. I'm a woman who really believes in the power of a healthy relationship and how powerful it can be for your own healing and for just your sense of self. Like it's having a healthy relationship is a very powerful thing. Everybody is looking for it. Well, most people, lots of people are looking for healthy relationships. And again, it doesn't have to be romantic, but having this field guide of like, these are just some basic elements of what a healthy relationship looks like. And you can use it with, a romantic partner, you can use it with a sibling, you can use it with a friend, you can use it with a parent, you can use it with a kid, and just, have some basic skills and tools so that you can really feel more confident in your relational skills.
I think that's a great tool to have. It I don't know too many books out there. I'm like really thinking, even like on my bookshelf, that were written by women about how to help men. So like I said, I think it's out in its own lane. It can be super beneficial. If guys, this is me telling you not subtly to go get the book, because like I said, it never hurts. I've never heard anybody say I have too many tools. We talked about having too many options, but you can never really have too many tools to help you, because we get a lot of different looks in day-to-day life from the conversation. You could have the same conversation on an app, on Instagram in a DM, and then in person. All of them could be different, if that makes sense. You navigate them different. when you are texting or doing a lot of written speech, you can't really communicate tone, do broad strokes of emotion. However, when you're in person, you can communicate a lot more of that, like how excited people can see how excited you are to talk to them. You can tell how flirty you're being. Like I said, your eyes say a lot. When even though the conversations are the same, they're different. So if you have a guide to help you navigate these situations, it's only going to increase your chances of forming better bonds with people. It doesn't matter if it's romantic or platonic or familial, but just creating a deeper bond. And I've said, I feel like all relationships create a domino effect. When you are more confident and comfortable in having a better quality relationship in one area, it just pushes to the next area. And then add this to your collection. I'm trying to fill this bookshelf up by 30, so be like me and just keep filling up your bookshelf.
I also really wanted to kind of have this be like a little insight into, what I see as a couples therapist, of like the common complaints I hear from women. If you as a man aren't, and you're solid in what a healthy relationship looks like, you also then can't be gaslit into thinking that you're the bad guy when actually your partner is deeply unhealthy. And so that was something else as well. It's like, hey, just because you're a man doesn't mean you're always in the wrong. And just because she's the woman doesn't mean that she's right. Like, this is some toxic behavior here. And so that was something else. It's like, having that confidence that as a man, you can be like, okay, I'm showing up safely. I'm being trustworthy. I'm showing respect. And actually, I'm on the receiving end of some pretty unhealthy behaviors. But then that can also give you the confidence of saying, like you were saying, if you're feeling like, oh gosh, am I going to, hurt their feelings, is having that confidence of, no, I'm choosing to leave an unhealthy relationship. And that's a positive thing for me, right?
Yeah.
But the gaslighting can be a real, obviously, mind trip.
That's a real thing from both parties. Everybody does it. Well, everybody doesn't do it. Anybody can do it. Yes. Is the better statement. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And it's not right from either party. But when often we hear this narrative that men have low EQs or they're just not emotionally available or attentive, when that's not always the case. So when you learn what healthy relationships are, or when you're in one, it just helps you for the next one. Or even if you're not in one, if you can learn, hey, I didn't like how I felt in this last relationship, really take the time to understand why, and then reapply that to the next relationship. You set better boundaries. You have better communication. Those are just crucial points that taking you up healthier relationships, because I said this communication is key. It's the first and last step to any relationship. So if you aren't communicating, or you don't know how to communicate your needs, then you do end up in a lot of situations where you could potentially get hurt or hurt somebody else.
Or the other thing is that if you don't know how to communicate your needs verbally, your body will communicate them non-verbally. And that is often what I see in relationships of, like, if you're listening and you're like, well, nothing really bothers me. Like, if my partner asks me like, hey, you seem off, what's going on? Nothing. It's like, well, we think we all know that there's not nothing going on.
I was like, that look right there, it's not nothing. That's right? Something.
Yeah. But again, like, if you don't have the words to tell your partner what's going on with you, your body is still going to communicate it anyway. Like, those negative feelings don't magically disappear. So you might as well get the skills and tools to communicate them in a way that you have control over them, rather than your body sending the messages or your tone sending the messages kind of outside of your control, right? It's like happening to you, but you're not directly kind of orchestrating, how am I going to talk about this thing that really did bother me? Or how do I just need to communicate, like, hey, I had a really hard day at work and I just need some downtime to just be left alone, right? Rather than I say, it's fine, leave me alone. And then now my partner's like, that was snappy. And, now we're in a fight about something else. And all I wanted was just a moment to be left alone.
Exactly.
That's what I always say is, don't let the message get lost in the delivery, right? And so working on these communication skills, working on, self-regulation, so that you can actually transmit the message that you want to transmit, whether by expanding your vocabulary, learning to moderate your tone, learning new language, so that you can be a more effective communicator and actually get your needs met, or at least, transmit the message that you want to transmit and not have it get lost in the delivery.
So that's such a common thing. Is I just remembered a TikTok I saw yesterday. There's such a disconnect sometimes, like between girl math and boy math, where you say the same thing, but you hear it two different ways. We each hear it two different ways. The thing I really wanted to focus on while I had you is the fact that I think another advantage or something I would want to know, since you were a woman writing this, is what are some traits that you feel like the masculine party is kind of up the ball on, or like, because we always hear the term "do better." What does that mean to you? How do you think we can start to do better as men or as partners?
So I think it just goes back to kind of like what you were saying earlier. When you look at yourself in the mirror, are you proud of the person that you see? Right? If you want to be a good partner, if you want to be a healthy person, are you doing the things that will help you get there or not? You deserve to have the best possible life you can have. And it starts sometimes with making sure that you have your own back, right? It's like, do you want to be healthier? Do you want to have more topics of conversation? Being a healthy person is an attractive trait. And being healthy is not just getting yourself to the gym. That's a huge part of it, but also working on your inner life as well. Don't do it for a partner, right? I often see that men end up, getting to that point when their partner is like, if you don't do it, I'll leave you. That's not where the best self-improvement work is done under the gun. If that kind of resonates with you, start looking at yourself and saying, what do I want for myself to be better?
Kind of our theme for this year is life like a Lamborghini, not a Honda. I was like, don't play it safe, okay?
If you are going to be serious about a long-term partnership, make sure you actually have the skills to maintain a long-term partnership as well. Yeah.
I was like, that's not something that's easy. I really wish people told you how difficult or cumbersome life can get. But no matter how many times people do tell you, at some points, you just really don't understand it until you are in that situation. Because for people who have two-parent happy households and you just see your folks 5, 10, 20 years into the relationship, weren't there for the beginning, you didn't see how rocky it was, or you just think that this is standard and you don't know how to start it. Fortunately, at least I haven't figured out a way to just be in a relationship. It takes time to foster those bonds, to get to know somebody, to create a system, a language where you're both on the same page and you know how to navigate those ebbs and flows there. But like I said, nobody really teaches you how to do that. No.
I'm glad you're bringing that up, because being good at relationships is a skill, right? And these are also skills that you can learn, but you do have to learn them, right? It's like if you became a Lamborghini owner, doesn't mean magically you suddenly know how to take care of this car, right?
Yeah.
You go on TV and they're like, hey, you want a Lamborghini? And you're like, oh my God, all my dreams have come true. And then you can't drive past the parking lot because it's a standard, or, you you don't know how to drive at all, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is like, if you want a Lamborghini life, you also have to make sure that you have the skills. If you want your relationship to be that, like, that people look at it and they're like, wow, what is that? That is amazing. Like, how did you get that? And it's like, well, I got really lucky. I mean, there is a luck element to like being in the right place at the right time. And I've worked damn hard to keep this thing running and in good condition. Right? I polish the thing. I read the manuals. I join the online groups of like other Lamborghini owners. Like, you devote time and energy and investment and knowledge. And so many people treat their relationships where they're like, I've waited my whole life for this. And then they do nothing to it. And they just run it into the ground. And they're like, I ran out of gas. I'm going to leave it on the side of the highway. Like, what?
I think you said something really crucial there that a lot of people miss. They're like, I waited my whole life for this. Were you preparing? Do any of the work? Because before I buy the Lamborghini because we deserve it, I would also realize, hey, that car is stick shift. Most of the cars that you see nowadays are automatic. So I was like, before I go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially on this thing, maybe I should learn how to just, like you said, do the basics, then go do it. Because you don't want to get it and wreck it.
Exactly.
you know,
Like blow
because
out the
that's another thing
clutch.
that we do a lot is like, okay, I got the relationship, and we think it's going to be smooth sailing. Nope, we stall out. That we don't change the oil, we didn't put gas in it,
Yeah,
and so we just abandon the relationships on the
exactly.
side of the road, which is potentially sad because, like I said, this could be a great investment.
Mm-hmm.
This could be something that changes your life for the better, but
Yeah.
you really don't know how to maintain it,
Mhm.
then it's kind of a waste.
Yeah. And then as the couples therapist, I'm the person that's like, oh my gosh, like you've been driving with the e-brake on this whole time? You've been using non-premium gas? Like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
You know? Like,
Yeah. It's like
there's a
I take it to
paper
the
bag
shop.
over the back window. Come on, you know?
You're like, I can try to fix what I got here, but
Exactly.
no
Yeah.
promises.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another point of the book you brought up, protector, provider, and procreator. I I love that trait scheme because I really think those are traditional roles that the quote unquote men have been given in relationships. Even though society and like the landscape has changed, I still think those are traits that we try to exude in most relationships. And he said, I don't think it's the end all be all. I was like, you can be a provider and not bring in the most income. I think
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't, like I said, I are traditional terms, but I would love to know how you think those traditional terms apply to today's landscape.
I think you just brought up a really good point. Like, I think these are very core, and like this research finds, these are kind of core masculine traits that men tend to gravitate towards, right? They're like, ooh, I like being the protector and being a provider. Yeah, there's something in there that feels, kind of innate. And yet, just allowing those natural or those innate traits or those traits that these men want to kind of assume just have a more modern outlet, right? So, like, what does it mean to be a protector nowadays? It does not mean sleeping outside your house with an AR. Like, this is not the kind of protection that most people, most women are looking for, right? So what else? What does it mean to be a protector? Maybe it's emotional protection. Maybe it's, protection from stress. Sure, maybe there is a physical aspect to it, but it doesn't have to be. And then the other piece of the providing, like you said, I mean, being able to have your identity as a provider be so much bigger than just your paycheck is crucial, especially for mental health in an environment in this economy, where it's like if you have your mental health or your status as a man be tied to your paycheck, like, ooh, you might be in for a rough ride, right? And so, as a provider, what do you provide? What else? Provide stability. You provide safety. You provide love. You provide reassurance. You provide humor. You provide play. Like, there's so many other things you could provide, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the same thing with procreation. It's like it's most people that are looking to have children are looking to do it in a partnership, right? Is that I need a co-parent. I don't just need somebody to procreate with me and then be like, oh, the baby's crying. You want to do something about that?
Right.
It's like being an involved parent is kind of the evolution of just the procreator.
How you're able to modernize it and find great examples. Providing support is massive. Bringing, like I said, bringing home the quote unquote bacon is great, but at the end of the day, what really matters and what's going to foster the next generation to have healthy relationships and healthy bonds, and for you and your now new unit, being present. Like you
So
said,
much.
hey, baby's crying, like do something. It's like, no, being a dad. I love when I see dads like baby's crying. They get up, they're changing diapers, they're getting bottles, feeding the baby. They're showing up to games, it's amazing. Or, girl dads. I love seeing the little videos where they're braiding their daughter's hair or like going to tea parties. I was like, that is amazing, because A, sure, it gives mom a break, but B, that it's showing your daughter that mommy's not the only person present to support you if you need anything. It helps you to socialize with men, which so many benefits. It's just engaging. It's more important because you have a present parent, from both sides, either side. I think healthier
Yeah.
relationships when you start dating, you don't have the quote unquote mommy or daddy issues. You're less likely to have some type of separation anxiety. having healthier attachment styles, more secure attachment styles. And once again, all these little things in combination create healthier, I would dare even say better relationships. And that's kind of the goal. Like you said, we want everybody listening, to live the best life they can. And this is part of it, showing up. Like you said, it's a different age. So showing up really does look different.
Absolutely. Honestly, like that's kind of what I see is the couples that are able to last a long time are two equally capable adults, regardless of how they split the chores, whether it looks traditionally gendered or not. It's they each know that have the capabilities to continue to run their life if one of them falls, right? And that's really that partnership and that teamwork is, let's say your wife is sick for a week, that the baby's going to get fed, the house is going to get clean. She's not the only adult in the relationship. And then vice versa. Let's say you get laid off, you lose your job, that your wife can be like, all right, baby, we got this.
Yeah.
Like, let's pull together and like, we'll figure something out. Like I have your back just the same as you've got mine. Like that's really what, helps people last through the ups and downs of life. It's not one person standing around helpless being like, what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
That's not an equally balanced adult relationship that has, thriving potential if only one person is pulling at a time, right?
If you think your whole role is just money or just this, and you're not really partners or helpmates, then you really don't have creates a bit of chaos within the dynamic, the family dynamic.
Absolutely. And also, I would say just from a mental health piece and a personal wellness piece, like if your money is the most interesting thing about you, get more hobbies, be more interesting.
Yeah.
If the most attractive thing about you is your net worth, like maybe there's some work on self-esteem that needs to happen as well, which is part of then what, having an involved parent, having a parent that's willing to put their phone down and look at the kid and say, I don't know if you've seen those videos circulating. I don't know if that's the algorithm is showing you these videos, but when the little kid walks in the room and their parent is like, not now, I'm on the phone, or you're good, does something to a child's psyche. It's like, you're not important. Take care of yourself. You're not very interesting. And all of those messages sink in. And that's where often then we see kids try to get parents' attention by like performing well, like, hey, I got an A, or I did this well, or I did this well, just like as a bid to try to get some kind of connection. And it can be really painful if a child learns that that's the only thing that's valuable about them is their accomplishments, right? I don't want to talk to you unless you have a good grade to tell me about. I don't want to talk to you unless, you got that promotion. I don't want to hear from you unless you're performing in some way.
Well, I think it's a great conversation. Before all my Austin listeners, hey, if you're listening from Austin right now, let me know down in the comments because we can connect. Also, if you are looking to start your self-help journey, you know where to reach out to. Kristal, where can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram at ATX Therapist. My website is strong.love, and my book is on Amazon and on Audible. So, yeah.
Well, guys, I already know at this point because Amazon
Oh, yes.
That's false. There's no way I'm going to get this episode by tomorrow.
By tomorrow.
This week by Amazon today. But I was like, Amazon always has that 2-day delivery. So I was like, I know it's already in your cart. It's probably going to be at your house in a day or two because you were so excited to get started. You already bought it. But yeah, go follow her on Instagram. If you're in the area and you, like I said, want to do some in-person sessions, visit her website. Somehow I drug my feet and it's closer to 2025. Maybe she has listings about these retreats already up. So once again, just go show her some love for me, but for yourself as well. Like I said, we both want you to have the healthiest and happiest relationships you can. So hopefully if the person that you're doing it with, or like I said, you do something local and you're in that area, go check out her website and her book. And then I'll see all you amazing people next week for another episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad.